Watch 2's Bob Keeling continues our team coverage now with attorneys Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean. Bob?
Yes, we're back with our experts, Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean, and some interesting testimony this morning, especially having to do with that stray hair that was found at the crime scene. We heard that right before the lunch hour, and I want to go straight to Richard Hornsby because you think this may open the door for some very interesting reasonable doubt to creep in. What's that?
Yes, I think Jose Baez's theme, and I think what they were showing today was very important. The fact that there is this Caucasian hair that they could not attribute to anybody at the scene leaves open the possibility of reasonable doubt that maybe, in fact, Roy Kronk did transport this body or some other third party that was involved in the death of Kaylee, and that's extremely important. And if this hair goes untested, the jury's left with a conclusion, well, what if? And what if is the same thing as reasonable doubt. And I've got to wonder if the state isn't going to take this time and go back and compare that hair at least to Roy Kronk to see if possibly it's a match there, or to see if they can figure out who that hair belongs to, because unless they can exclude that hair from being a suspect, well, then the jury's left with the conclusion that there must have been some other third party involved.
Well, as a former prosecutor, Jeff Dean, is that the type of thing you can do while the trial is at this advanced stage?
It is, and the fact that it hasn't been done, it really illustrates Richard's point that they settled on a theory and they went with it. And I know that Jeff Ashton has been rightly praised for the cross-examinations he's been doing, but today he's walking a little bit of a tightrope here. The reason is because when he points out that, for instance, this hair could have been found anywhere, or that the list of people that it could have come from included many, many more people than the list they read in court, when he's doing things like that, like saying the trunk lining was removed from this UCF chemist who tested the chemicals, he's got a problem with that, and the problem is this. Jose Baez can point out a lack of evidence, but he doesn't have the burden of proof. You've already heard this judge allude to burden shifting, at least generally, and some research that he's got to do. I don't know what that's about specifically, but I'll tell you this, Bob. Every time that Jeff Ashton points out something that evidence doesn't show, it doesn't show him for him either. And the problem with that is that the state has to prove it all. Jose Baez only has to point out what it didn't show.
Well, and Richard, I want to ask you about the tests that we heard today, the results on the hair mass that didn't show any historical presence of things like Xanax or any sort of knockout drugs. As a defense attorney, how many points do you think that scores with the jury?
I got to be honest, that particular line of questioning, it kind of threw me off, because it's a double-edged sword for both the defense and the prosecution. On one hand, if the defense had not gone there and they were still hoping to get that lesser offense, it would always left open the impression to the jury that, well, wait a minute, maybe Xanax is more in line with what Zanny the Nanny is, or something else. But the fact that they went and tested the hair, they basically excluded any history of Casey Anthony using Xanax, say for a few months prior to Kaylee's death, to sedate her. And I think that had to be a strategic decision. But on the other hand, yes, it shows that, in fact, there was no history of trying to sedate Kaylee, so it would go against any motive or any pattern of bad conduct against Casey. So while I definitely think it hurt the prosecution, I think it hurt the defense in that it precludes the jury now, says, well, wait a minute, yeah, I'm sure she wasn't using Xanax to sedate her child, so it must have been the state's theory if it's not something else.
Well, and Jeff, don't you think that that Jeff Ashton did a good job of neutralizing that by saying basically you can't test chloroform, and if it had been used to kill the child, that wouldn't show up in the hair?
It does show that, but again, he's got the burden of proof, and he's got to go a little bit easy on some of these witnesses because they've been his witnesses. He has the burden of proof, so every time he eliminates a proof problem for Jose Baez, he eliminates it for himself. He's got a circumstantial evidence case. At some point, if this defense is going to be successful, they have to start tying up these loose ends, and Jeff Ashton is establishing things that the state can't answer either.
And Richard, you had brought up the point, you know, we heard from this geologist from the FBI, and they talked a little bit about the shovel, but you felt like maybe there should have been more testing done by the state on that shovel. Why?
Well, here's the thing, the jury, all they have to do is find reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt can be found in the failure of the state to exclude a certain piece of evidence or a certain theory or certain use. And so the failure of the state they just stopped. Like he said, they accepted a theory and they didn't want to find out if they were wrong, so they should have gone and tested against the soil in the backyard. They Anthony's house to see if it was used to remove Kaylee Anthony. They should have gone and tested the soil at the crime scene to see if it was used to put her there. And the fact they didn't do that has left this jury going, well, wait a minute, why not? What were you scared that you might find out? And if I'm Jose Baez, I point that out.
And guys, one of the things I've heard the most feedback on was Jeff Ashton saying yesterday that Central Florida does not have coyotes. I've got phone calls first thing this morning. Jeff Dean, you've done some research on that subject.
I did some work in my own backyard. I live in sort of the rural area of Oviedo, and I found a coyote playing in my backyard. And Richard's holding the picture of when the coyote realized I was taking his picture. There are coyotes in Florida. I've got the proof right here, and I don't know why the state attorney wouldn't have known that.
Bob, I got to think Jeff is going to win an investigative journalism award for us on this.
I see some wily research.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
It's a very wily research. So a little lighthearted moment at the end of a better day for the defense, a half day, because Judge Perry said that he's got to go do some wrangling on the budget up in Tallahassee. So a little bit better day for the defense. And we'll see how it goes tomorrow on a full day. Let's get back to you.
That's all right. That's all, folks. That
poor botanist is never going to live down that whole coyote dog bone moment.
It
Thanks,
inspired
Bob.
quite a debate amongst a lot of people here. All right.